Recording in progress.
Okay, I'm going to call the town's special select board meeting.
Yeah, it's true.
Thank you. I'm just going to and while this is our retreat, we do have a couple agenda items. So I'm going to look for approval of the agenda. Who's drafting?
Second.
Second, any requested changes to the agenda? None, all in favor of approving the agenda as drafted, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, next is approval of the consent agenda, which has a number of first, second, third class liquor licenses.
I'll move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Seconded. Any comments on the consent agenda? Hearing none. All in favor of approving the consent agenda as presented, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, get into our retreat discussions, and then we do have a little bit of business afterwards. So one of the things that we talked about was having just kind of a brief introductory biography from each person, share your priorities for the upcoming year as you see it. Is there one particular end that would prefer to start? Go ahead.
It's the shortest biography.
I am Isabel Godry. By day, I am a teacher at our local middle school, so I come to this board with that perspective. And like I've shared with the community a lot, something that's really important to me is that all people feel a sense of belonging. So things that are really important to me are just feeling like I can attend programs, even if I don't necessarily have the time or traditionally the money to be a part of a town in that way. So programming is really important to me. The library is really important to me. I think about how many third places adults in our community have. And there's if you're not buying a drink and if you're not buying a meal, there's not really a lot of places for adults to just meet for free, and same with kids. So last week's presentation on diversity, equity, and inclusion is also something that's really important to me, making sure that all people see themselves in this community, feel represented in this community, as well as recognize what they can do to improve the community and feel like they have a voice in that. So I represent young people. I'm a renter who uses the laundromat every week. I'm someone who's in their first career and intentionally chose Middlebury. And I don't want what happened to Esther, where she lost her rental and it wasn't something that she was able to continue with, happen to me. And that's continuously a fear of mine as a renter. So I'm here as a renter. I'm here as a first, time employee and someone who hopes to stay here for a while.
I'm curious what you're thinking when you say program. What areas of accessibility?
Yeah, so I really like the work that Parks and Rec does. I think the programming that they do is a revenue source for us, and it's also a source of people seeing community. And I know just recently the library did CPR, first aid. Like, I just think of these things that people don't necessarily think is like, oh, like, this is my go-to group. I am lucky to be a part of those through like paid fitness at Vermont Sun, but I wonder like what other opportunities are out there. The library with book clubs, gardening clubs, as well as a lot of other outside programs like youth sports, Tai Chi, archery, chess club, thinking about things that we do at the middle school and at the high school level. Like, could we mimic that for adults? Because that would be really fun. And build people, being engaged. And when they see Town of Middlebury emails, they're like, I want to know what's going on, and I want to continue to sign up for programming, and I want to continue to be involved with the decision-making process.
Great.
Thanks for the question.
Great.
I own a small business in this town. I come from India, and I've been on the select board for 6 years now, I think. What's my priorities? I think it's pretty consistent with the rest of the select board. We've been talking about this the whole year, what we want, what are our priorities. Housing is one of them. Of course, library is on the horizon right now. These are my priorities. I used to be a big fan of the broadband, which Maple Broadband has a presence now in the town, so I'm happy about that. But also there's a lot of new players coming in, like Fidium is making big inroads. So I think we should be okay on that one. Infrastructure, I think, I do not like infrastructure competing with any other projects because it's a very important thing. That's the lifeline of our town. That's a priority without saying it's a priority, I think, any of those projects. Yeah, that's where I am right now.
Yeah.
Well, let's see, I'm retired by day, I'm a vampire at night, or,
Your name, please?
what's that?
Your name?
Oh, I'm Dan Brown, and I'm former owner of the Swift House Inn, and I am retired. I'm the oldest on the board, and, I think I bring my business sense to the board, and I've only been in town for about 20 years and served on lots of different nonprofits in town, and I have that experience. I think my priorities are the library. I think it's a incredibly important project that we need to get off dead center with, and hopefully we can come up with the funding to accomplish that. Of course, housing and daycare are what we all should be talking about. Another one is interest to me, and this is partly due to my experience as an innkeeper, and also the experience we have with short lack of housing in town, and that's short-term rentals. I think we need, as a town, need to address those. I think the state has made a weak attempt to address those. And I also, again, I think we do this like every other year, but resurrect the EDI site, Bakery Lane, whatever we're going to call it. We need to do something to start that and get that moving again. So.
Me?
Want to swing over to you?
Yeah, that's fine. So I'm Lindsay Fuentes George. I've lived in Middlebury for about 13 years, 12 years. And I think in that time, I think when you start out at a new place, you see things that are wrong with it and right with it in stark contrast. And the longer I've been here, the more I'm seeing the good things about our community and just wanting to increase those. My priorities for the year are the library, which I think is a community hub that's for everyone and accessible to everyone and offers so many things that aren't offered elsewhere, and so many things that are free, which is great. Childcare, I know we have I know the college has a big project coming up, but I am wondering if there are other things we can do in the meantime, because I think families have probably been hurting for a number of years. My neighbor's driving, 30 minutes each way to drop off her baby before going to work, and that's it's tiring to do that every day and to know you're going to have to do it for 4 years or 5 years. Yeah, and I'm excited to talk about the EDI site. I think I've said before, and like Izzy and I'm sure everyone here, I just want to be sure that whatever we're coming up with is accessible to everyone and that we maintain access to the public in that area, like the physical area. So that's it.
Okay, thanks.
Izzy, I love your earrings.
Yeah, handmade. I didn't make them.
but they're really cool.
Roll off Instagram.
I just had to tell you that.
Thanks.
So I'm Heather Sealy. I feel really weird telling you all my name.
Yeah.
Tell them each-
I've
We're
lived
the only
in,
ones watching this, so.
I've lived in Middlebury since I graduated from college. Came back, I was living in Cornwall with my parents, went away to college, came back, moved in with my now husband, and that was in 95, however many years that is. My birthday's next week, and I hit the big 50. Woo! And you know what's really weird is when I was younger, I thought 50 was really old. And now I'm gonna be 50, and I'm like, I am not old.
It's not old. It's not old.
The age of what's old keeps moving for me. I remember being a teenager and thinking like my life would be over at 25 if like certain things hadn't happened.
Old to me now is 90.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Teenager, what's
So
that?
anyway,
I'm close to it.
priorities. I have a hard time getting out of the whole infrastructure. Obviously have blinders on with all that. Specifically related to that in housing, I personally just have a desire to understand the stone crop ledge and the infrastructure related and how we can help as a town and what that looks like. And with pricing the way it is, I'm definitely on board with Emily's suggestion that we go heavy on engineering right now and have shovel-ready projects, which may mean delaying some construction for a few years. And I think I'm pretty on board with that proposal from her. Other than that, I'd really, really, really like to see that South Street job project done, finished. That's a couple more years. I was really hoping we'd get something done on Bakery Lane, but I don't know pricing. Other than that, I do obviously think childcare and housing are very important, but I struggle a little bit with how we as a town can help, especially with childcare, like what we can do to make that better. The library is important to me too. I guess the big thing for me right now is just I've felt like in our whole capital budget planning process that we are already pushing the limits of what we have for staff and equipment and stuff, and just want to, in my own mind, think about what it means to add more and what it means to the tax rate, and I don't want to get behind, so that's my thoughts.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sure. My name's Andy Hooper. Heather's got a couple months on me. I'll be 50 this fall. And yeah, hard to believe that these gray hairs are actually mine. I was on city council in Montpelier for 8 years before moving to Middlebury about 10 years ago. And I've been involved in solid waste districts and communication districts and a whole lot of various municipal overlays in Vermont over the last 20 years. And I'm really glad to be here. I think this is a highly functional board, and it's really nice to be a part of it. Enjoyed my first year here tremendously. My priorities are varied, at least. I'm interested in looking at our municipal services and making sure that we have feedback on where we're meeting our residents' expectations and where we can improve. And this partly ties into our DEI conversation yesterday about closing the loop there and making sure that everyone feels like they can participate, that the town is aligned with them in the ways that they want to engage in municipal services. I'm interested in looking at some areas of regionalization where maybe it makes sense to think about combining efforts on things like software purchases or support. A lot of things that we're doing 250 times in Vermont where a bigger place is doing it once. And we suffer from inefficiencies there over and over in schools and in towns and cities in Vermont. Looking at Middlebury and the pieces for the next year, yeah, very excited about the Stonecroft and the movement on the childcare. It's nice that the top priorities from last year both have some traction. I do hope that we can begin to shift the perception that this is a place where big things can get done, and that the town is ready to work with people who want to start something new here.
Can you clarify that perception that big things can't get done?
That they can.
They can.
Yeah, right, like,
But was your insinuation that it was
there is an insinuation there that this is
Previously that they
seen
couldn't
as
do that?
as a place that's difficult for things to happen. I've heard that from several sources, and I've not experienced it myself, but I don't want anyone to have that perception.
I would agree with that perception.
Yeah, okay.
Not that I agree with it.
The perception exists,
Yes, I'm agreeing that the perception exists.
yes.
Okay. Well, Brian Carpenter. I grew up in Middlebury and have been back after getting out of the service for it's my 31st year now. Own Champlain Valley Equipment and got involved in our local government because at the time I disagreed with some of the ways people were representing the town, and I didn't feel that they were necessarily looking at what's good for the town long term. And so when I look at priorities for us, I always kind of think about what's it take for a town to survive. And so for me, the first thing is that kind of the infrastructure stuff. You need to have roads, housing, and people. You have to. So what are when I think of our top priorities, I think about, and then you have to have commerce, and certainly things like the library are great, but you can have a community without a library, but you can't have a community without people, and you can't have a community where people will stay without commerce that's local. And so supporting those types of activities are a high priority for me. But to make it sustainable in the long term, and then things that make it enjoyable, provide culture and the arts and amenities and stuff. So that's why, for me, the housing and childcare were so critical. And I get the challenge about what can we do, because we're not the builders, we're not the developers, but we can talk about it, make sure people know that we fully welcome it, and then support it with letters or things like actively looking at zoning, or maybe something else that pops up, soliciting the support of state government. And state government is, through everybody throwing their voice, has really come to the table for the Stonecroft grant. They got a huge chunk, 40-something%. And so for me, those activities, when you talk about what's the time that I invest, I feel like I got to, personally, I would always committed to something that's going to bring long-term stability and long-term sustainability to a community. And I think that's one of the reasons why I feel our community has to grow, and we have to have more housing, because our businesses are going to collapse because they can't get enough people to keep them going. families this hardship, but they won't want to live here if they can't get the childcare. And you can't get the age of the people to move here if they don't get the childcare. My wife and I both, we never got childcare in Middlebury the entire time we were raising our kids. We had to drive to the far reaches of Cornwall every single morning and afternoon to get our kids. So, we've lived it, and I know it. That doesn't mean things like the library aren't a very high priority for me, but talk about weighing those things that I always feel like you have to have your infrastructure in place, and
Yeah.
you got to do the things that bring people to the community. So, but that's where you got to dig deep. For me, I got to dig deep because people got to love the community, and you got to attract the best people. And so then you got to have the arts and the sciences and everything that makes people want to live there, and you got to have equity. And so it's a challenge. But when I weigh priorities, I really look at the sustainability. That's the big thing for me. Is it sustainable? And have we got a plan in place that makes it work? So that we're not, we could build everything and throw a huge bond out there, but the town will collapse because we won't have any money. We'll be paying the bond, we won't have any money to do the routine infrastructure. So you gotta look at that long-term view. So that's kind of how I look at it. I guess I'm the second oldest on the. So I would like to have you just kind of weigh in on we're going to set the committee at the next meeting, but is anybody got strong feelings on moving committees?
Are we talking about that today or next meeting?
Right.
It was on our agenda just to take a quick look at it.
Yeah,
So we
you
can
said
be
this will be
thinking.
finalized on 4/11.
So I feel like I got off pretty easy last year, and I probably should have a couple more meetings every month.
Is there something that you're interested in?
I really like all these things.
That's so
Okay.
specific.
Yeah, there's nothing stopping you.
Be careful. I can't go to that many meetings. I will take what other people don't step forward for.
Have you only been on the board 1 year?
Mhm.
Huh. I
I think
would've-
so. I'm getting
It feels
older.
like
Everything's fuzzy.
Yeah. It feels like you've been here much longer than that. Not in a bad way, just.
He's pretty comfortable.
You're not on one yet,
Yeah, I don't see that.
all right?
I know.
Yes, he is.
She's actually,
He's
she's
on
on,
the public safety is the primary.
Okay.
Isabel is on Parks and Rec, so I was hoping I will back out from that because she's a select board member now, so you can be the,
Well, actually, that's where I was thinking, because she's very
Yeah.
passionate about Parks and Rec.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think that will work
Oh,
better.
that's awesome, yeah.
And I haven't, yeah,
And I'd also love to do the diversity, equity, and inclusion work group.
Wow.
We have to talk about our next, we're in transition phase, so.
going to transition to a bigger community.
I think she'd be
Parks and
great.
Rec, you know, it's my heart, so I don't mind.
One good thing
We
is that
could
I need to-
use, so I'm happy to stay where I am unless somebody has really good reasons to switch. But we could use a second select board member on infrastructure if,
Well, I was actually thinking it'd be really good if we're talking about training Andy up here, to get Andy onto the exposure.
There you go. Sometimes you get 2 meetings out of that one.
I think that.
There you go.
the other thing is we do meet,
Oh, it's mid-morning, right?
it's 9
No, it's
o'clock
early, yeah, it's first thing in the morning.
I call that
on,
mid-morning.
on a Thursday.
Can you do that?
Every other Thursday, right?
No.
Once a month unless
Once a-
there's too much.
Once a
and there's
month,
twice
but we do, often move it around depending on the bid cycle and.
Gotcha.
And in capital budget season, we typically meet twice in October, sometimes twice in November to hit deadlines for that. Just so you
Tell you
know.
what, in the interest, so I've opened it up, we're gonna set this at the next one. You
Yeah.
guys all negotiate where you'd like to be, think about it.
Aye.
But in the interest of trying to get into our main mission, we're
Sure.
gonna move forward here. We wanna look at the library, which is one of the things we all decided. So you're here obviously because we let you know our main mission, one of our big issues is to talk about funding structure and how do we move the library plan forward. So we're going to jump into that and so our so we have a application, so your hope is to get three and 3/4 million in different grants, is that where you're?
Well, yes, that would be
Come on up.
the hope. So this.
Come on up so Beth can hear you.
So I think you're referring to this document,
Right.
which is our potential funding sources. And this lists everything that we are planning on applying for as of this moment. So if we were very successful with all of our applications, that would be $3,745,000. That assumes we get a $2 million congressionally directed funding request from Senator Sanders, which I can't speculate as to the likelihood of that. And it assumes we get $1 million from the Catalyst NBRC, which that hasn't even, the library hasn't even gotten permission to apply for that yet from the Infrastructure Committee and Select Board. And I don't know how competitive we'll be for that.
Dana, I'm sorry, can I interview? That's also the one we're applying for some infrastructure projects. And Stone Crop is applying for funding from our,
Stone Crop is going to hold off until next year
for that one.
for that one.
Okay. So my only point is there's some potential, I don't know how, conflicts, right?
Daycare's got
For this year?
Yeah, so as I said, it hasn't come before the select board yet, so I'm not 100% sure the town will decide to submit that application, but yeah, that $3.7 million assumes that we're very lucky with all of these. There are a couple things which are left out. There's a grant from the Department of Libraries that we're gonna apply to shortly, but we still don't know how much we might be eligible for. They have $26 million to disperse to Vermont Public Libraries, which is more money than they've ever had before, but we don't know what the application ceiling is. I'm hopeful that we'll be able to apply for 500,000 or more, but I don't know. The 3.7 million doesn't include the capital campaign. Christine Graham, our fundraising feasibility consultant, has proposed that we test a $5 million campaign. So this fall, when we do the feasibility study, that's the number that she'll be trying to determine how close could we get to $5 million. So could be 2, 3, 4, 5. I don't know. So that's why I left that blank. And then of course this doesn't consider if we were to have a partner or another organization that wanted to make a gift or to support the project or something.
So the
like
capital
that.
campaign is essentially looking at most likely donations from individuals as opposed to institutions.
Yeah.
Bless you.
How do they test something like that?
So Christine and her so we will generate a list of people that we think could
could be potential donors in the community or know other potential donors or are leaders in the community. And then we develop materials that give a high-level overview of the project, why it's necessary, what it'll cost, what we're hoping to achieve. And then Christine and her partners schedule interviews with 20 to 30 of these individuals and ask them a whole bunch of questions like, what do you think of this project? What do you like about it? What are your concerns? What would make it more appealing? How do you think the community is responding in general? Do you think the community would be supportive of a bond vote? Do you think the community would support it financially? And then I think ultimately they get to the question of, would you support it financially? And if so, to the tune of how much? And do you know anyone else that might be a good, someone that would be personally interested in this project? And so I think through that, they try and get a sense of how many lead gifts could we get, and what might they be worth. And then I think once they have that information, they can kind of back into a general idea of what the campaign might bring in based on previous experience and other similar concerns. Yeah, so the cool part that I have enjoyed learning about as I work with Christine is that the number that you expect to fundraise is one thing you get out of the feasibility study, but you also get a lot more. You find out what the community is thinking about the project, how you could be more successful at bringing people into the process going forward. You get a lot of feedback through the feasibility study, so it'll be really cool.
So I know you're using Christine for the private fundraising. Is it beneficial to have some professional for the grants, or are we fine by ourselves?
That's a good question. I think so far it seems like we'll be okay by ourselves. So far, that is my sense.
Dana's done a lot of research into what is available for a project of this kind, and it's surprisingly less than you might think for this particular kind of project. Our biggest hopes are probably on the grant, which doesn't have a dollar sign connected to it, which is the Department of Libraries, capital funding, and we think that we are well positioned to get a grant there. Part of the challenge on the fundraising front is a town project, it's a municipal project. Most of the fundraising that's done is for privately owned firms, privately owned organizations. It's not as common to be raising money for a municipal library. Usually the town is finding some other way to pay for it. And related to that is the fact that it's a Middlebury project. However, the library has an impact beyond the town to surrounding communities, and it is in the surrounding communities that some of the people with greater capacity for giving might be living. So we'll have to see how that plays out. And we're not just going to go to people who live, inside the town of Middlebury.
And when if she started the feasibility study, she'd be targeting by the beginning of the year, or how long does that feasibility study take?
So we've been preparing for it, so I think our plan is to, let's see, September and October to conduct the interviews and carry out the bulk of the feasibility study. And then start preparing for the quiet phase, so start preparing to ask for leadership gifts in November, December, January, and then actually start doing the fundraising December, January on through.
But when would we have the results of the feasibility study?
The end of October, mid-October.
November?
Yeah.
To be safe, yeah.
Do you have enough funds to do that?
Yeah. Well, coming.
We'll be returning
July
to the board
1st.
in April to ensure that we do.
I think that was part of our discussion with allocating money that wasn't in a budget that wasn't approved by voters yet. We
Right.
had that conversation.
Right.
Yeah.
So we'll come back for that.
It's been approved, but the contract has not been approved, yes.
When do we hear on some of these budget requests? Like all of the ones listed here, when do we know on, do you have a spreadsheet that times like when the application is due and when they hear? And sorry, I'm gonna ask a second question. Are there time limits on when the money needs to be spent by?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yes, so I think the congressionally directed spending, we should know about that late spring, early summer. They don't have an actual date, but I would think May or June at the latest is probably when they would be announcing that, just based on what we've seen in past years. A lot of the smaller ones, those are gonna be I'll be applying over the next year, and they'll usually be out 3 or 4 months to 6 months after the application submitted. The big ones, the catalyst, I don't even know even if we submit that, we won't know if we're being invited to formally apply. They have to invite us until May. I think they would invite us to apply in May. We would apply by the end of June, and I think we would find out, I can't remember when we would find out, but probably assume 3 or 4 months after that. So the fall, we would know. The Library Capitals Fund, which I think will, as Joe said, I think that will be a substantial amount of money that we're well positioned for and competitive for. We should know this summer whether we get it. That's gonna be a quick turnaround. And then the Municipal Energy Resilience Grant, which is the other big one, that's $500,000. Again, I'm not 100% sure that we'll be able to apply for that, because I think the town might have multiple departments that are interested in applying. And I can't remember off the top of my head.
Which one is this, the VCDP?
No, this is the MERP.
Oh, yes. So terrible.
So this is one we've been talking with the Energy Committee for about 18 months on.
Yeah.
On that.
So most of these, by like the end of this year,
We should know.
we'll have a better idea of,
Well, no, so the smaller ones, let's see. BCDP, we would apply for in February, so.
next year, okay.
Next year. And then community facilities, that would be March of next year, so a little over a year from now. And that's because the VCDP in particular they don't want us to apply for an accessibility modification grant until a bond has passed, or until funding has been secured in some other way. And then to your second question, yeah, they all have different dates by which they would want us to expend the funding. And the one that's in my head, just because I've been working on it recently, is the catalyst, the NBRC. That I think funds have to be expended by the end of 2026.
So I just, so for those who don't know, I work at the Vermont Community Foundation. I'm the payroll and benefits specialist there, but I'm part of the finance team. And Let's Grow Kids is a supporting organization of the Vermont Community Foundation. And Let's Grow Kids, I think the money that the Child Care Center got is going through Let's Grow Kids and ultimately through the Vermont Community Foundation. And I don't know much about it because I don't actually get into the details, but my understanding is this federal money that comes through a congressional designation is not simple. It's not like, here's the money and good job. there's a lot of strings attached. There's a lot of tracking, there's a lot of stuff that has to happen with those federal dollars. And so, just my limited knowledge, experience, and what I've heard, it makes me a little nervous. And I don't know if Kathleen would say the same thing, because that, somebody in the finance department in the town has to manage those requirements, so. Do we have?
We do have federal grants. These Vermont Community Development Program grants are
The same. So you're
Have those.
already pretty aware of that,
aware of it, and it is quite onerous.
yeah.
And we have reported previously that the finance department is under pressure. We have rounded out our staff there, but that's to meet current day demand.
Yeah. So I just think that's an important thing to think about. So if we, if we receive a congressional, whatever you call it, earmark, whatever it is, there are strings attached, some pretty thick strings, and it may result in some additional staff time needed in the finance department as well, so.
I'm glad you pointed that out, because I think that's something to think about. And if we were to get $2 million from Senator Sanders, that might be something that it's very worth it to take on that onerous work. But the accessibility modification grant is $100,000, and that would be federal funding as well. And so I imagine that would come with
Same string.
the same amount of work. So it could be that some of these smaller ones, $20,000,
It's not worth
might not be worth it on the
Yeah.
back end.
And then some of these have specific requirements, like you have to pay people a certain wage.
Oh, yeah.
So,
David Bacon, but this is the Davis Bacon laws, yep.
so.
Kathleen, do we generally do one audits, the federal compliance?
The single audits,
Yeah.
we have been in single audit territory for the last couple of years.
Okay, because of ARPA monies or?
We had a FEMA grant for the flood resiliency project,
Okay.
which was $1.3 million.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm doing a little mental gymnastics here, so just kind of, say we were lucky to get all of these grants, then we're still in the $10 million need. $10 million need. On a 20-year bond is basically 10 cents. So on the average $300,000 house, it's going to be close to $300. What scares me is 10 cents is more than a 10% jump in taxes without any other cost of living stuff. So then we talk about what I've been hoping, which is that we could do something and have a TIF fund it, and your payment is $934. So is it reasonable to think between the municipal and education taxes, we'd need to have $40 million worth of additional tax base back here?
Brian, will you just remind me how it works again? Like you develop a property in a TIF zone, it's appraised at some value. What that value would normally pay in the education goes back to pay towards the
project that
pro-
this is designed
Okay.
which is an essential need that wouldn't have happened
But it was specific parts of the project, right, that the town paid for? Like, all I can remember from when we talked about this a few years ago was the St. Albans example where they built the parking garage. And it went to pay for the parking garage, right?
otherwise.
But that doesn't pay for like a library, right?
Find the libraries that community need that isn't going to happen without some other resource.
Oh, okay. So the library could actually be,
That's what I've been talking about. Library would be
okay, I know, I'm just trying to
a.
I'm just trying to wrap my head around how exactly it works, so.
Now it's even more complex, and that would be really nice, because this is just a one little project. So, the state didn't get support from our legislators, that has to lower the budget to be that. It will reduce the amount of work for our staff we can do it just in this one project.
But that means then we have to move this whole, the whole EDI Bakery Lane project forward at the same time as we move the library forward, yes? Because we can't do the library and not have the development,
We wouldn't have a way to pay for it.
yeah, yeah.
So then when you're asking the voters to approve the bond, you have the means to pay the bond.
Right,
Other than,
other than the tax rate, yep.
other than on their tax rate. And at some point, this is kind of this whole sustainability thing I really worry about, because you look at, the voters approved a 17% increase in the school budget. And, that's income sensitized, and so I don't know. It's not everybody's sucking up a 17%, so when it all flushes out, what is it? We don't know what for the next couple of years with this crazy inflationary period that we've gone through, whether we haven't seen it settle out yet. And that has me a little bit concerned.
Me too. This is my first budget season, obviously, on this board, but it felt like we were moving some one-time monies around to cover systemic increases in cost. And there's only so many of those rabbits in any hat that are available, and once you run out of them, you have to deal with the underlying cost increases.
Well, Kathleen's been warning us about that for 3, 4.
Well, particularly with some of those items, yes, we used one-time money, but we tried to match up one-time expenses with one-time money.
Yeah.
That said, we are running lower on our fund balance because we have been drawing in that in a major way for several years.
Sure.
And we had, as we just went through both of our employee contracts with the unions, we, because of the position that we were in with them comparative to other unions around the state and whatnot, be competitive and it showed a pretty significant jump. So,
I don't want to rush the EDI development. I don't want to rush that through because we're trying to tie it to getting the library done. I know we say that parking isn't an issue and there's plenty of places to park, but a few weeks ago, on a Friday afternoon, a group of work colleagues, we all came down to celebrate somebody leaving at Mr. Up's, and we came downtown at 1 o'clock on a Friday, and there's no place to park back here. There was no place on the side. People were already parked on the lawn and where there aren't parking places, and I'm not in the position with my knees the way they are right now to park down the hill and walk to Mr. Up's. And there is nowhere to park on a Friday afternoon at 1 o'clock. So, I'm a little concerned about what happens to like Mr. Up's, to that business, if all of the parking that they enjoy right now is not there anymore. So, I just think that conversation is bigger, it needs more time than what we have to figure out the library thing.
Yeah, and I wouldn't want to rush into a project, and obviously I wasn't here for the next bridge project, but I wouldn't want to be in a situation where we only have one bid and we feel like we have to go in with that company and kind of meet their demands in order to get the library what they need. I wouldn't want to be in that position.
Well, and I get all that, but so are you supportive of a bond for the total amount for the library? And if not, then where do we go from here?
Well, and an important factor is this library project is pressing forward. After 2 years of everything we do, we're now looking at picking an architect to build, to design a $15 million project without a whole lot of commitment right now from either the town or grants of being able to come up with $15 million to pay for it. And if we're going to fold it into the EDI site, it's going to add 2 years at a minimum.
How many bake sales and book sales do we have to raise the money?
A lot.
I get that it's going to add a few years, but I think that's a realistic timeline, personally.
Well, I
I don't
understand.
think you can have a sustainable tax rate
Mhm.
and start throwing 15 million at the library on top of everything else.
I agree. I understand.
I'll just mention that this is the second attempt at this since 2014, right?
Right.
We started in 2014, and my sense is that the perception that the town has difficulty of getting things done may have something to do with Next Bridge and that project.
I think it goes a little deeper than that.
Well, it might, but, here we are.
Well, we certainly, since my time on the board, we certainly have a lot to do and need a lot of money to do those things, and it's a struggle to figure it out. Just as a reminder too, we do have a public works department that is, we have outgrown and is in need of, the whole site is outgrown, so that was something Dan was working on. We obviously can't bring it up with everything else that we have to do, but that is something else that needs attention, so. What are this would be real popular. Everybody can shoot me now. What are the chances of increasing the local option tax for a short amount of time?
What about what?
The only allowed one's that.
You can't, the state won't consider
I don't know what the state will consider, but right now it's 1 cent.
So is every town allowed 1 cent currently? Like, that does not require a charter change at this point?
I think they expanded it, I don't,
Are you proposing like 2 cents instead of 1, or?
1 cent would buy you a library.
The other thing I think about with the local option tax is it spreads out the money around the greater community. And it doesn't just,
For everybody.
it isn't just the back of, on the back of the town of Middlebury, or the residents and the taxpayers in Middlebury.
So, yeah, okay.
I do agree with that. My concern would be take the auto dealers and guys like me.
Yeah.
Somebody's buying a $50,000 tractor.
Yep.
Sure. Penny on that's what, $500? They'll drive to Pittsburgh or some other place. I think we're very competitive having a local option tax, given that all the majority of the major areas have a 1 cent local option tax. But I think when you talk about
Increasing it.
what's it do to business in the community, does that have a real negative? Our monthly properties, monthly tax check to the state is substantial, as I'm sure, as are the auto dealers.
Yeah.
So
I-
people they'll pull out of the community for $500, which is why I'm very sensitive about a $500 bill on taxes, because if they'll drive to Burlington for it, then they're looking at those $500 charges.
I don't disagree with you. I'm just trying to think about ways of, alternate ways to spread that money around. Can you consider 3 or 4 years of 1.5%, or I'm just asking.
Here's one of my concerns. We're trying to build the library in a 1 or 2 year period. We don't build roads in a 1 or 2 year period. And this is what I said early on. We need to get an alternative. What's driving it is we're afraid the furnace is going to collapse.
And the elevator.
But does that drive good decision making? You're making decisions because you're afraid of something. Is that a good decision? I'd say no.
I think that you've simplified it a little bit there. There's a lot of inadequacies in the building and be able to do business and stuff like that.
I totally get it, but those inadequacies have been there for a long time. What's driving us now and the urgency is because we're afraid that we won't be able to heat or the elevators collapse. Well, I don't think you shut the building down because the elevator, you may have to rearrange some stuff, but you sent me a thing. If you look at what the Middlebury taxpayer pays to support our library versus Cornwall, Weybridge, every other community, that's kind of eye-opening. I don't have a problem paying for the library. I have a problem making urgent decisions about the library. That puts it all on the tax base. I really don't like. I've told you from the start, I'm very supportive of the library. I will not personally vote to put a bond in front of our voters for a $15 million bond. I just think that's ludicrous. We haven't done that for anything that we didn't get outside support for. We got the college to work with us on the town offices and the town gym. And how many years did we deal with it? I used to go to a town select board meeting and I was embarrassed. The town of Middlebury held their select board meetings and that, but they did it for generations. And I get that the library is not great. My kids, we lived over there with my kids. I personally am not a user of it because I have a nice office, so I use my office. But I get that it's a very critical part of the community. I just think we've got to brainstorm a better way to pay for it. And if we aren't willing to take the time to go through the whole process to do EDI. Try to pay for it that way, because that's not a 1 or 2 year, that's more like a 5-year. Because we gotta get the state to approve it, we gotta get people in. Frankly, at the cost of things, 5 years probably good, because maybe the pricing will come, we'll have some adjustments on the pricing. If we build in year 2 now, we're gonna pay more than 15 million. You guys are dreaming to think you can build it in this day and age at the 15 million. Given the folks that we're getting on simple stuff.
It's not going to get better, though, is it? You have a better sense.
We've seen stuff, I don't know. But certainly,
You mean the construction cost? Is that- Yeah, it could change.
it's all about competitiveness.
Right.
You know?
Well, we as a select board should have pitched in on this when we put the committee together 2 years ago and said it's going to be with an EDI site, and good luck, you got 5 years to develop it. And we didn't.
No, we said, what do you want for a library? I would say the library committee is the one that said, we need to do it. I told Joe that I would not support a bond like this. But you guys have been pushing, the library group is pushing, and I love it. I love you guys are pushers. I don't have a problem with it. But I'm pushing back, I'm saying, I don't support it. Because we can't afford it. I want the project to happen. It's one of the reasons why I got ran again, just to see if we can put something together. But I think we gotta find a way to put a deal together.
Mm-hmm.
And it can't be on the taxpayers, solely on the taxpayers' back.
Well, I know the library committee has been trying to do that, and maybe we don't have the right people that are either on the committee or that we're working with to put this deal together. So what do we do as a town? What can we do as a town to try to help this project out, to get the right people to put the deal together?
My only idea was the EDI.
Yeah, I know.
If you guys don't support my idea, then just.
It's not that I don't support it, I just don't know where to go. You've got a lot more knowledge than me, and I don't know where to go.
I just, that whenever I think of that EDI site, my anxiety level goes up because it was just, I just felt like and it just wasn't a good process, and
Yeah, but we did the master planning since then, and we got
Yeah.
support for different.
The parking is the only.
Initial EDI project.
do we have some kind of agreement with Nextbridge that we have to consider what they originally proposed way back then?
No.
Okay.
No, it would be a fully new process.
Here's my question with the library. Given that the library committee has made the decision to stay in the current building, could you move forward with the furnace and work that into whatever plans you have, so that at least the furnace situation is solved? And maybe the elevator as well, you know, with the intention of like, okay, this might have to get moved, or, you know, like, we're gonna have to put it in, take it out, and put it back in. But since those are two of the huge drivers, you know, I'd hate to go through all this process and then voters vote against a bond. That would be a real problem. And I think it's clear we all support this project in theory, but we also are, you know, we also need to make sure that we're presenting something to voters that has a funding source, that we can say to them. They ask us nitty-gritty questions, I'm sure. You know, people go through our budget line by line and we'll ask, you know. So I think it would be irresponsible to just put it forward and expect, you know, people to eat that increase. So I'm wondering, I'm thinking about a more phased approach.
Well, Couple of points here. One is Dana and I and some other members of our team put up a sort of information table at the polls. And, talked to people as they came by. We had, I would say, 98% of the people who came by were very supportive and very enthusiastic. And we said, hey, we might be coming to you in the future and asking for money. And they were like, sure. So I think the sentiment seemed to be very positive. Anybody remember what this project cost in 2017?
10 million,
Yeah.
$9.6 million. How long ago was that?
2014.
17.
2017,
17.
right? So
17,
about
sorry.
5 years ago? So you want to go out another 5 years? Brian could be right, the prices could come down, but that's not the trend. So I think the longer you push things,
You're in a COVID bubble right now, Joe.
I,
The supply chains, at some point, it's got to have some sort of backlash.
well, it might, but I haven't seen those prices coming down. Maybe they will, but I mean, I think if you push this out further, it's going to cost more, and we need more money. And I think if I'm in a position where I have a problem with my tractor, or in my case, my car, which is a Volvo, and I take it over to Packard in New Haven, and I get this fixed, and I go back and I get this fixed, eventually my wife says to me, look, you're putting more money into it here, get a new vehicle. So I don't know about the patching up. I don't think that
Well,
what you've suggested is feasible, but.
Well, so, as you know, we looked into what it would cost to replace, to
Right.
do the heat pump system, and that was a little over $1 million.
Right.
And so, of course, the town decided not to do that, because why would we?
Right, because we were
Exactly.
gonna, have this
Um,
conversation.
I have been trying to find out what it would cost to just replace our existing boiler. I have not been able to get a quote. I guess the winter is just a busy time for
Right.
that field, so I'm sorry that I don't have that information. But I would, if we're gonna go the route of trying to pull off a few more years in that building, I would say there's gonna be some serious deferred maintenance that we need to take care of. So the boiler, whatever that costs, the elevator, which if that elevator did go, I think that is a pretty big deal, because that leaves every floor not handicapped accessible. Because you can't even get to the main floor of the children's room without going up and down stairs. So we'd
Right.
be completely
There's no way in
ADA
without, right.
compliant. So that we would have to replace that, which would be a couple $100,000. I think like 400 was the estimate we got. There are things like the roof, which has been leaking a lot this winter, to the point that it's coming through lights, light fixtures. We've had to turn off half the lights on the third floor. We haven't been able to have someone come look at it because there's been snow on the roof. But things like that, we've just kind of been pushing out, not wanting to invest too much money right now, thinking
Right.
we're about to
'Cause if we're- yeah.
ask for a lot. So I think anything's possible, and we can hang on in there. But the longer we hang on, the more money we're gonna have to put into really fixing that stuff. And the third floor doesn't have a secondary egress, and we're not really allowed to use it anymore as a public space,
The third floor, or MC,
where MCTV is.
so they can't be up there, or they are, but it's,
They have
can
to have a second egress if they
They
want.
can have
to.
Right.
they can have up to 4 or 5, I think 5 people.
okay.
But that
not
kind of
more.
limits the whole public programming aspect of their.
Right.
operation.
To keep this building going for a couple of years, we're gonna have to bond something. We're gonna need a couple $1 million to just keep the building going. I mean, we can renovate the building with $6 million. Right? That was, the cost
Oh, yeah,
estimate
the
was,
option A, you mean?
yeah.
Yeah, but that doesn't,
I mean, I
No, it
think
doesn't
we
solve the
keep it
problem.
Going for less than that, but it would be enough that I think we would have to bond for it, because well, Kathleen could answer that better than I could, but a couple $100,000 we would need to bond for, right?
Well, you're talking about a lot more than a couple $100,000, yeah.
You're a couple $100,000 on a roof right there.
But then I think this question, are we going to sink this money into an elevator and then have to do it again?
I agree.
How many architects have you?
6 submitted proposals, or
Six.
statements of qualification.
We got From 6 teams. So it's not just an architect, it's an architect, and they have teamed up with construction managers, with estimators, with engineers, and so on. So we got 6 hefty packages, actually.
And what's your timeline to sort through those?
I think we were hoping to have a recommendation in the next 3 or 4 weeks.
Yeah, we're hoping to have something for you for not next week's meeting, but the one couple after that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then we would have 4 perhaps?
Yep.
And we would entertain some design work from them,
Yep.
preliminary designs. Following that, we may have an idea if some of that was reusable or not, is kind of what you're thinking.
You mean?
Not sure I understand.
Like, there was some indication that by doing it there and entertaining different people's viewpoints, originally we said, gotta tear this all
Oh,
out.
yeah.
And then
Oh, you mean whether or not the 2 additions would
any of the
need to come
additions
down?
would be
think they'd
potentially
probably come
reused or
down.
not.
Right. The conceptual designs would either propose tearing them down or keeping them and repurposing them. So yeah, I would think by the end of the summer, if not by the end of the summer, we would know whether we're going with a conceptual plan that calls for tearing down the additions or not.
I can't imagine them
Keeping them.
mostly not wanting to tear them down.
Yeah.
They're so
I
useless.
haven't looked closely enough structurally to tear it all out.
I think the 77 edition, the one right over here, is gonna come down in pretty much every conceptual plan.
Yes.
And the 88, maybe not. That's my hunch.
But the 88 one is the one with the,
The
Yes,
trusses.
trusses.
right,
Yeah.
that make it large, sorry.
So,
I like that.
so we go through a process with these 6 people and award 4 of them with the intention that they're thinking they're going to get a contract to design a library,
Maybe not.
and we're just gather ideas. I mean, I'm not sure, can we do that? Do we want to do that?
We're paying them for their time.
We'll give them a little seed money of $4,000 for them thinking they're competing to
Get a $15
build a
million.
$15 million building. They might have a little different enthusiasm.
I'm sure there are other projects that have gone on that people have gone through this whole process and they get to the point in the end where they just don't have the money to build it.
Yes, but usually not, that decision usually isn't made at the beginning of the process.
I would say, having gone through the submissions, a number of them mention the fact that they've worked on municipal projects before and they're familiar, they're comfortable with taking pauses for fundraising and they understand the complexity. So I think everyone's very much hoping they get the contract and it moves forward swiftly, and that if there was a brief pause, they would probably understand.
I think,
Gossens Bachman resubmitted, and they've been, in their eyes, they've been on pause for 5 years now, so.
yeah.
And they're back.
I mean, I just think what we might want to do is the stopgap measures that keep things going. Move through the process with the 4, the 4, whichever ones you recommend. And then I would recommend working a phased approach into it, or just having the conversation about, we're going to replace the boiler now, we need to be able to reuse it. I don't know.
You're just talking.
The challenge is we don't have a design where to know what kind of heating
Right.
they would use, for instance.
Right.
Right.
So I think it's always a challenge talking to, like Nick, who's an engineer, to have a consistent, especially where you need consistent humidity and stuff. The heat pump in that old building would be a very big challenge. Reading, the whole heat pump thing has become a really big deal at the State House. So I got a quote to do heat pumps in my house, just my house. And their guesstimates on what it costs for their heat pumps aren't even close. And there's the number of heads you have to do that have to do what I'm doing with just regular system.
Can I ask for a little pause? My wife brought snacks for everybody. I would invite you to join, so everybody's invited to, because I have to break my fast, and I hope you join.
It's time.
Happy breakfast.
Not you, Lindsay. Please join.
This will be the fourth year I don't get invited to eat, I suppose.
I don't think I'm
Always
gonna
about the
get
money.
there for the,
Particularly good dates.
What's the tax and tax for municipal building and municipal building?
You limited it to 2 cents on the tax rate.
So have you looked for funding sources that aren't specifically library? Like here, I've just done a Google and there's a community facilities direct loan and grant program in Vermont for building public facilities that include bathrooms. Like what have you looked at?
Yeah, so we've looked at the
Like, can
community
we
facilities
piecemeal
grants,
things?
and we're not really eligible for those.
Okay. For what
Is
reason?
that the USDA?
This, yeah.
Is that income eligible for the grant part?
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. So from you, from
We're the right size town,
USDA,
but-
the only, I talked with, the Vermont USDA office, and the only thing we'd be eligible for through their department is $50,000 for interior, like furniture and technology.
Okay.
Or they had a specific grant for that we could apply.
So we'll get that. We'll apply for that at
We'll
some
apply for
point.
that, but yeah, but like the big money
Right,
through USDA, we were
right,
not
okay.
eligible for.
Because.
That's all right, we'll hit them up for the wastewater treatment plan, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
So.
So I have tried to cast a wide net in searching for grants. Cannot pretend to be a grant expert, so I'm sure there are resources out there, but I have really tried to call everyone I can think of at any of these government, state, or federal agencies and talk to them. And it's really tough and frustrating.
Yeah.
Because it seems like we're really just not eligible for much. And a lot of the ARPA or funding that's been coming out seems to have requirements that we just don't quite meet. Like a huge part of the, it has to be wastewater. Well, that's a really marginal part of what the library project will be, so.
Right.
But if,
We'll put a pump station right in the main lobby. Will that qualify us for some more?
That's what I'm saying.
I
Can we
think
put a
there's-
childcare center in the library and then we tap those? I'm just saying.
I'm happy, if you know of anyone that is a grant specialist that wants to work with us, I'd be very happy to have the help. But from what I can tell, there's a reason why most libraries have a hard time getting funded, or are funded through their towns.
Right.
Yeah.
I think a grant specialist is actually a good idea, though. Might be worth the money.
so far it seems
Find
like it's a
someone.
lot of work for not a lot of money with a lot of strings attached on the whole. So,
Yeah.
for the grants.
Yeah.
Yeah, when we're talking about how much we need to get a $20,000.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a lot of things.
A lot of work for that.
Dave and I were just talking about also recognizing if everything goes, we will see some grand list growth within the community from the growth of the housing. That, because it would not be, I don't know, is there any really connect the housing to what's
Build the library in the middle of it.
because As it's not a TIF district, you would only have the town's share. And so it would get you partway there, maybe 4 cents or something like that. But that's after it's all built out, and I don't know that. It's the timing thing. Because I think they're probably looking at a 5-year, something like that. Build out. Certainly, once they get the permitting done, they could go faster, but I just don't think we have that many builders.
Well, I hesitate to bring this up because this is really your purview, and we don't have a whole lot to say about it. But the college in the past has been a very generous partner of the town for many of the projects that we've had, and we know that they already contribute in a big way to this building, to the gym, to the bridge, and so on. Library is essentially an educational institution, as is the college. The college attracts new faculty members. The new faculty members have kids. The kids come to the library. I'd be willing to bet 90% of them are frequent users. Were it possible to approach the college and ask for a contribution that could be, over the course of 20 years, could be a pretty modest contribution on an annual basis, but that would add up over the course of time. But I'll leave that in your more experienced hands. But I think that we have found that the college president is well disposed to libraries.
So you've had no discussion with her at this point?
No, we have not. We'd be happy to, but we don't want to go around what you guys are.
Yeah, I think if we were to approach them about that, it should definitely be you two. Good luck.
Well, I don't disagree with you. I didn't know if you had any conversation and cocktail. I mean, you know, the library, college says faculty cocktail parties and everything, right?
Yeah. Talk to Andy about that.
Okay. May I ask what, just to give us a target, how much would we each be comfortable asking for a target to add to the property tax rate to support the library? Does anybody give a thought to that back in?
I was about to ask you that.
Whoa.
Yeah, I don't know right now, because it's really the context of everything else, right? If we are still looking at high single-digit inflation numbers outpacing incomes around here, and that kind of environment, I'm much more reluctant to that substantial kick up for 20 years in our municipal property. I think that even though that is a long-term investment, and part of our role is to think long-term, it's the economics of the month and year that people are thinking about when they vote on street expenditure. And I think that the downside of another failed bond is huge. I want to make sure that we had full force press in favor of this thing, and massive support in all of our ducks.
Another failed bond? What was the previous failed bond?
We had a bond fail.
South Street,
What?
South Street.
You didn't do a bond for South Street,
Well, it was the whole,
the whole water.
it was a bond, but it failed, right? But it was a whole it wasn't just South Street, it was
When was this? I'm sure.
2010?
It's during my time away, Heather.
Oh, I don't remember.
What happened if
I don't
you had
remember,
been here,
so-
Kathleen?
I don't remember the detail. That was a long time ago. But
We've,
the bond failed. It was a combined, like, we're gonna do all of these things with this money kind of thing.
in my time in the town, the bonds that I've seen that we put forward have been very, very well structured and very well thought out and very, a lot of information went out and you were pretty comfortable. I don't think they were iffy. Particularly like the firehouse, when all the firemen come with their fires, their dress uniforms into the town meeting and stuff like that. And what you did for this, to build this, was magic. Trading off things like that, so, and the other bonds have been relatively small, which, like we did this year, they're kind of no-brainers. Personally in my heart, yeah, I would say I'm willing to take, for me personally, but I can't think personally. I can also think about my business, and when I came here, we had about a $36,000 a year that we were paying in property taxes, and that was outrageous compared to in sales throughout the United States. When I sold it, we were in the mid-50s, and adding a 10 cents on that property tax there is $3,000 a year.
So that's
It's turning my other hat, when I was a businessman here, I was saying, it's almost getting too expensive to run a business when it has a lot of property on it in this town.
And that's 10 cents added to any other increase we'll have that year, right? If there's any other bond competing as well, then we'll add that.
We and you have been very, very good over the years, that we've limited our tax increases over the last 5 or 6 years. I mean, it's just been fabulous what we've done. And this year, we kind of had to bite the bullet and had our biggest one in a long time. Yes, it was at least 7 years, yeah. So, and there's a lot of justifications for that. They're painful. So, it's a conundrum for me.
The question is what are we willing to do to get this project done?
May-
And even one of the most avid supporters recognizes, Dan, you recognize the challenge of that. It all to go on the tax bill.
Sorry.
What else have we got in our kit bag?
I don't know.
Is there a possibility to do a downsized version of a TIF and back that with the growth that we're projecting within the community from housing increase tax base? So you're not looking for it all down back. I don't know. Then now you're.
That feels like as much of a contingency as the EDI, right, to say that we're going to expect these properties to get built and overcome all the hurdles between now and then. And that would,
I think you have to have that come forth before you commit to bonding.
okay,
You can't bond with the promise. It's that guy, the hamburger guy, gladly pay you.
yeah, yeah. Pay you Wednesday for a hamburger today.
How much do we think, so I was just looking to see if I missed something in the packet. Is it talked about in the EDI presentation?
What's that?
The whole, like what is a potential TIF district actually raise? Does it raise enough money to,
Depends on the value of, so there is a, Kathleen did a spreadsheet in here
Is it in there?
titled, Municipal and Education Taxes Raised by.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
list. So, if in your TIF district, you, say you did 30 million of increased valuation, you would have roughly $725,000 additional taxes. Well, it depends upon non-residential, so it'd be 710,000, 711.
where are you getting that?
He's adding the first two, or the first and third column from the 30 million row there.
Oh, it's both the municipal and the non-res.
That's why the TIF is so attractive, because you know the education portion is roughly double what municipal is. And
But you have to have those buildings built
Right.
yeah,
to get that money.
Yes, it's diverted tax revenue.
Right, and so given the
And you got
construction
that
climate right now,
that's why I say timeline has always been my concern.
okay, so I didn't really understand when I looked at this
Not that I
table.
don't agree that we need it, and not that I don't support it. It's the timeline
I know,
question.
I know.
So just a question, I mean, you are all smart people, and some of you are well-versed in municipal funding and so on, but I'm sorry, I'm probably speaking out of turn here, but it seems like you're a little bit of an impasse. Have you considered bringing in, I don't know, a financial consultant or somebody just to stimulate thinking, to consider alternatives? Or am I being overly optimistic that those alternatives exist?
I think we've got most of the alternatives on the table. It's where do we feel we can get the best? You're working grants and
Fundraising.
philanthropy
Yeah.
and tax revenue.
Well, Andy's married to an economist, and maybe she
And
would have
she will
some.
always say, she's not that kind of economist. No matter what the question is, she's not that kind of economist. I will reach out to Vermont League of Cities and Towns and see if there's things we should be thinking about
Yeah.
that aren't being discussed right here. They talk about this stuff all the time. It's their day job instead of their Tuesday evening job.
I don't think, in my years on the board, not that that's any kind of, how have we paid for infrastructure? We get grants, we get low interest loans, or we raise rates if it's water or sewer users, or we bond, which, that's pretty much it. And we don't even really get to talk about private fundraising because we can't private fundraise and ask people to pay more taxes in, the same sentence. So the TIF is something new that I don't think that I completely understand, but You know, I'm just worried about the time frame, which I know you guys are too, and yeah, we could, you know, I mean, I think realistically, we'd need to come up with a couple $1 million to put into that building to buy us the time to get the EDI property done and get some buildings built in order for TIF money to be available for the library, and then we're back to square one. I'm assuming that a lot of these grants you're looking at are for new construction and not for renovation or replacement.
Most of these grants are for renovation and replacement.
Oh,
Not-
okay.
There was nothing for.
But the
rebuild.
smaller ones, right, like, we can still apply for these grants if we just renovate and replace some things?
Oh, yes, yes.
Okay,
But some of, at least the Vermont Library's capital project is a one-time grant. So if we don't apply for that this year, we'll miss out on those funds.
so even a $2 million bond to do what we need to do, we're talking about it around roughly 2 cents on the tax rate already. So. I think if we could, you asked the question, what would we be comfortable with? If we could figure it out, so we had enough money and had to do a $5 million bond, that I could probably support that. Almost 5 cents on the tax rate. It would be tough. That'd probably be my limit right now, but that's looking for $10 million outside of, you know, money raised in the taxes, and I feel like that's pretty tough.
5 million would give us option A, not even that.
Yeah.
But I think Heather's proposing combined with everything else plus something else as of yet undetermined.
I still think we should look at,
It only takes one person writing a $10 million check, that's all it takes.
Yeah, that's all it is.
you're signing up for that, right?
You will sign.
I do think we should look at what we
Yeah,
could
we
do
should.
fundraising wise, like selling bookshelves or whatever, you know, I know it's not a lot of money, but
No, and I
To
completely
start
agree.
selling stuff, we need to be prepared to let that stuff go. So
Yeah.
that would be further along in the process, I think, because we still need the shelves.
no,
She means like having people sponsor a shelf.
yeah.
That makes
Yeah.
a lot more sense.
Like
I was
the
like, I
bricks
don't think
over at
we're
Town
gonna
Hall.
get
Yeah,
that
no,
far.
like, so for my level,
Fundraising initiative. I
my
understand.
level of ability to support the project is
Just
like
a
buying a couple of bookshelves,
The
you know?
Heather Sealy Financial you know.
Yeah,
There we go.
so.
So naming opportunities.
Yeah, but that are small enough that the average person can participate.
When we visited the South Burlington Public Library, there was a name on the back of every chair in the auditorium.
Yeah.
So there was a price point for every donor who wanted to.
Manchester and South Burlington had names of donors all over the place.
Yep.
We have it right in our own town. You go over to the Town Hall Theater. It's a great example of
Mhm.
how they, everything from a brick to a bench to a big plaque.
To
And they're
a-
in the middle of it again,
To a studio.
for a lot more money.
And there's a plaque on the wall in this building that also acknowledges people who helped out.
And so that is part of, you were asking about the feasibility study, like the community, if there's 5 other capital campaigns going on all at the same time, that may limit the ability to raise private funds because there's other competing interests for limited dollars.
So timing wise, we think this fall is a good time for a feasibility study in Middlebury. The Town Hall Theater project specifically they'll have entered their public phase and their quiet phase will have been over for a while. And so Christine thought, looking at the local landscape, we're in good shape.
You can play it by ear based upon, if you start seeing banks fail, it's probably different.
Right.
Than if you're seeing a recovery or whatever, so.
Yeah.
I think there are probably considerations you ought to keep in your holster as to, so that it's not locked and inflexible.
Yeah.
So though I don't see a decision here among this group, should we move ahead with our process to evaluate these people who have submitted qualifications and then on to that next step of design competition?
I think that's important. I've seen a lot of head nod, and
Okay.
it's not a question of whether the support is there for,
Yep.
that they want.
Yep.
It's how do we pay for it? We haven't
Right.
got that solution yet, but and so what you promise
Yep.
is probably, that we're looking for something that we can continue to move forward.
Right.
Could be 1, 2, 5, 7, however many years, but,
Yep.
you know,
So then I think the question, we would come back to you in the summer, when we kind of narrowed it down and say, okay, do we go ahead, start working on some drawings now, or, because our plan had been to, and money has been set aside in the capital budget to move ahead with schematic design. So we'll check in with you on that question.
Well, for me, it's a little bit of a question, and maybe this is for your feasibility person. It's a question of cart or horse. Like, people may not be willing to consider donations until they have some idea of what you're trying to build.
Yeah, right.
In which case, you have to get through that process so you can show them, so you know
Yep.
what people were willing to donate. Like, if you said, oh, we're thinking of building a library, but you couldn't tell me what you were building, I might not be as interested in funding, so.
Yeah, I think the plan that we've been working with all along has been to budget to get us through schematic funding, which would allow us to more easily go to donors and would make us more attractive to potential grants in the future. So many of these things want us to be shovel ready.
Yes.
And it's totally cart before the horse. It's like, how do you do that without funding? But I think I'm really confident, and I can continue to express this to all the firms that have submitted their statements of qualification. But I think they all very much understand that whichever firm is awarded the contract for schematic design it would be a separate contract to do construction documents that would be contingent on a funding source. And they know that that's not a given by any stretch. So I feel very comfortable that we're not leading anyone on or anything like that.
it's important also to get as soon as you can, to get us an idea, price on a boiler. And I think when you talk $2 million, you're talking like putting a new roof on and stuff. What would it cost to patch the areas where it's leaking and whatnot? Because if we're gonna tear down a bunch of that, I don't think you want to put a new roof on it. Have an idea to get you through. Frankly, you're not gonna start construction in the middle of winter, so you got at least one more, even in the absolute best case scenario, you got one more winter in that building, right?
Yeah.
It's a dreamy scenario.
That would be
So,
wonderful if it was just one more winter.
but we can be making decisions on some of those things too, before it's too late. We have to order a new boiler. I'm not supportive of putting in a whole new heating system when you've got a system that works, other than the fact that the boiler.
Oh, I don't know that I would say, well, yeah, I
It's
guess
not-
I mean, the radiators like spew boiling water occasionally, and there's other problems, but yeah, it works.
And Plouffe, they're almost every week, every other week.
Kloof's is there quite frequently, yeah.
We have frequent flyer miles with.
We all review the check warrants, and we see plenty of repairs.
Been getting your punch card? Like, do you get a free boiler at some point?
We're working our way up to it.
Any other comments? Or it's at the end, and we got a couple more things.
I have, as a Billsley board board member until last month. I was concerned that the LZ 100 team suggested that this option was going to be quicker and easier than the EDI. But that was the part of the sales pitch and the approach that was given. And I thought that might be optimistic and perhaps unfair to the thought of moving down to the lower water, as well as including the cost of the parking in that, which was not part of the coverage.
We thought it was quicker than option D.
That's probably
that
us
was the
that
thing.
did that portion.
It was
of
not quicker
It wasn't
by any
that.
means, but it was quicker than if we go to the EDI side. That was the,
Potentially.
If we had the money.
if we had the money.
Sure.
And
Yes.
Can I know I'm not really part of the brainstorm part of this, but I was just wondering, the local options tax, I understand we can't increase it, but is it possible to kind of earmark some of that? Like for the next 5 or 10 years, this much surplus of the local option tax is gonna go to the library.
We're already baking it into our, that's how we're, one of the ways that we're
Keeping taxes from going
keeping our
crazy.
tax rate under control.
Okay.
Is we're using some of that
For capital improvements, to offset
for
capital.
the capital improvements, but, you know, which would be, the library would be basically a massive capital project. So it would be to take the money, we're taking as much as we really probably should at this point, so to take that, it would be taking it away from other capital improvements. So one way or another, it's gonna impact the tax rate using those monies.
Or we're gonna have to do some capital repairs. I mean, we're gonna have to come up with some money, no matter what. But
Yeah.
again, then we might have to do a bond just to keep the library standing, well, over the next 5 years.
If we tried to bond for $15 million, I think Victoria would like camp out here.
She's right here.
Okay. I just mean, you know, she brought up how much money we are, you know, how much additional money we wind up paying every time we bond, and a
Yeah.
$15 million bond
know.
is gonna blow anything we've done to try to mitigate that out of the water.
I don't think we'd ever ask for a $15 million bond. I don't,
not even 10.
Well, to some of the grant funding, just like with the water tank situation, may require you to bond for the full amount of the project
right.
to demonstrate the community's support for the
Right.
project, to then get grant funding to offset the amount.
Right.
So there is the potential that we ask the public to, just like we did with the water tank, the water storage, we're asking them to bond the full amount, and hopefully we don't actually end up bonding it, but
Well, I think we would have to have a whole bunch, we would have to ask for what we already haven't funded. I mean, if they've got $5 million that they've raised, then we're not gonna ask for a $15 million bond.
right.
Right.
If
That would be
we
how
raised
it-
5 million in private money, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
But any grant funding may not come off of that bond for what you ask the public to bond, because that's part of the commitment.
Right now, all the grants that they're seeking are not based on a plan. They're based on that you've got a library and it needs improvements.
Yep.
I think I said that correctly. Okay.
Most of these are reimbursement grants, so yeah, we would have to pay for it and then get reimbursed.
The idea of a TIF, you would bond, and then the money is for the.
Pays for the bond.
Pay phase for the bond.
And, but you're also asking the community to bond that full 15, right?
Right, with the knowledge.
With
With the knowledge that the TIF is
Right,
paying for.
and that's the thing, we have to be
Well,
able
it's
to
the
say
same,
we've
it's
got
the same
something.
thing with the water,
Yeah.
you know, it's a smaller scale, but,
Well,
yeah.
the difference with the water, you're bonding and saying we're more competitive for the grants. We don't have the grants in hand. With the TIF, you get approved for the.
But we may not have the buildings built when we do that.
It's all, yeah, it's the.
So, so same thing,
Well,
we,
you'd have to have a commitment. Yeah. It's- it would-
but they aren't, we have a commitment, but they aren't actually built yet, right? And we
And
look at
just-
the whole, look at the
and
hole
li-
in
and the
downtown
library-
Burlington.
And the library isn't built yet, you know,
Right,
so
right.
it would be, that's why you would need a professional project manager. And you would have to have contracts and commitments, and there's risk
Yep,
downtown Burlington.
yep.
Kathleen, the numbers you quoted are at a 4.45 or 4.74 rate. What was that like 4 years ago, just so I can feel that?
Well, until we issued some bonds in February 2022 for 1.9.
Oof.
Okay.
Oh.
Thanks, Sen. That worked. I feel bad.
Well, that's what you were looking for,
That's
wasn't it?
exactly what I was looking for.
Yeah, okay.
Thanks to you all for your hard work.
Oh,
Thank you.
No,
thanks
Yeah,
thank
thank you
you.
guys for
coming and
focusing on the
suffering with us.
library. I really appreciate it.
We needed to do this conversation.
I think we'll have a lot more information in the fall. with these grants.
We will keep thinking.
I hope that date works.
Joe, you around, 2 weeks from now?
Yes.
Reach out to me, let's chat a little bit about your idea there.
Yep.
I've got meetings the next 2 weeks. So.
Okay.
The-
Thanks.
The only other funding source I've
See you
seen
Thursday.
in whatever 15 years of various boards was revenue bonds, which we were looking at for communication districts, where you get, it's like a TIF essentially. You get it to build it out with the idea that the revenue from what you're building is going to pay for it. It's what Burlington Telecom did, and we were planning to recreate that with EC Fiber. And it was spring of 2008, when we were about to go out and ask for our $20 million of bonds, so that Citibank or whomever would build all this fiber, and we could set everyone up in East Central Vermont with fiber to the home network. Obviously,
Those are pay things. What did we, I mean, our library, we just voted to go free library.
So if we
No, we can't-
reinstitute
we
the
can't use
fines,
revenue
we could do this with the
bonds,
fines.
But the downside of this other method of funding also is that Citibank called the Burlington Telecom bonds in because there'd been some weird commingling of the Burlington Telecom and the city budgets. And anyway, they basically stepped in and said, actually, that's all ours. And there was a lot of finagling in Burlington to maintain the independence of the utility that they've created with the alternate revenue source. It very almost went under. And you might even say it did, and then it somehow resurrected.
The Phoenix.
Did. Anyway,
Thank you both for all your hard work on the project.
Thank you for your support. Have a good night, everyone.
good night.
So the capital account closeout is postponed. We got a response. Kathleen, you want to just walk everybody through the response?
Sure, we did get a response to the board's appeal to the CLA, and we boosted the CLA slightly. COD went down a little bit. Not what you had hoped for results, but given the changes that are afoot, or hopefully afoot at the state level, a reappraisal for the town is several years out, at least anyway. So in consultation with the listers and our town assessor, Allison Joseph, they recommended that the board accept the revised CLA and COD, as they have presented all of the information they have to contest.
9/100ths of a percent.
Wow.
Is that what a bone looks like?
Wow.
Any questions? Pleasure of the board.
Easy, here it is. Go for it. You get to make a movement.
Motion.
All
Motion,
right, motion.
same
You know
thing.
me in words.
Okay, I move that the board vote to accept the results of the Division of Property Valuation and Reviews redetermination of the town's equalized education property value and coefficient of dispersion as of April 1st, 2022. And I authorize Chair Brian Carpenter to sign the proposed stipulation indicating that the town will not pursue any further appeals.
Second.
Seconded, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Check warrants, Ron?
I did the check review, everything's fine. I'll move to approve total expenditures in the amount of $434,087.77, consisting of $320,535.18 for accounts payable, and $113,552.59 for payroll for the period of March 22 to March 28, 2023.
Second.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
So
Executive session.
can we go back to, there was discussion of other strategic planning matters.
Yes.
Are we just gonna talk about that later? Or are we thinking what other things do we wanna talk about? Are we thinking about other meetings? What's the plan?
That's, I guess, a question for the board. Is there anything that anybody would like to have a retreat on? Or would you like, is there something that you would like to have scheduled for a block in a board meeting? One of our open meetings.
How far out is the child care project?
The Otter Creek?
Yeah, for it being ready to accept
At
new.
least another year, at least.
Couple of years.
Probably a couple of years.
Right. So I'm wondering about the possibility of offering tax forgiveness for homeowners who want to start an in-home childcare to defer the startup costs of starting that business in their homes.
They don't even, the state doesn't even really support those anymore, does it?
They do, there are a lot of them.
I thought it was like huge hoops that those people had to go through to,
There
anyway.
may be, but there are a number of them operating in town and
how
have
could
been
we
for a
as a
long
town
time.
help? You know, if there are hoops, is there anything that we could do to help out?
Yeah, that's just what I'm thinking. I'm not saying it needs a whole meeting. I'm just trying to think of what else we could do in the meantime.
I think that's a lovely idea, and I think that a bunch of folks who aren't childcare providers are gonna be in a tough place to figure out where we can most effectively help. And I wanna hear from people somewhere in that path, and what would be useful for us to do, rather than kind of just suggesting a tax effect. There could be in-kind, public works, things we could do. There could be, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm throwing out an
I like the
idea
idea.
because I've been thinking about it. I'm throwing out.
They have a daycare.
Daycare.
Yeah, but it's in Heinsberg, yeah.
Yeah.
But there's I think we have local people who actually.
Yeah.
are
Scott
knowledgeable
Gemignani
on
used to run a daycare out of his house.
I know, my
Yeah.
daughter went there,
Oh,
but,
yeah.
yeah, but I think that the number has declined significantly with the state's regulations around what
Very
you have
strict,
to
very,
do
very
to
strict.
open a in-home childcare, and I don't think it's very cost-effective anymore because of the, anyway, I don't know. It would be interesting to get some testimony from somebody who knows more about it. I
And would like-
certainly don't.
I would like to know the hoops, you know, like I would like to set aside some time to kind of learn more about the topic.
So I can certainly reach out to people I know at Let's Grow Kids and see if somebody would come here and talk to us about that.
I think that's a
But do
great
you want
idea.
that for a special meeting, or do you want that for a retreat meeting, or regular meeting, or?
I think a regular
Do
meeting.
that just as a presentation to the board.
Yeah, on a regular meeting, I think it wouldn't take that much time.
So is that something you want me to see if they have somebody that can talk to us about that? Does the rest of the board want me to?
Yes, please.
pursue
You
that?
mean somebody who owns a in-home daycare?
Well, I was thinking about just reaching out to the contacts I have at Let's Grow Kids. I know part of what they do is supporting
Yeah.
childcare providers, and training and starting businesses. I'm pretty sure, so. Not that I'm an expert on what they do, but,
I mean,
If not, they're gonna know who to ask.
oh, yeah.
if it is a process that requires a lot of hoops too, and we are able to identify, let's say, 3 people willing to do it, like, helping them as a cohort
Yeah.
might
Yeah.
take away some of
Yeah.
the stress of trying to figure it out on your own. So I just think, you know, if there's more we can do in the meantime. And even, you know, as we push for additional housing, there are gonna be kids. In, you know, so whatever the big project, you know, with Otter Creek comes up, we might still have a shortage. I just think,
Did anybody suggest to the Stone Crop people that they should provide a daycare there or childcare
I don't
facility
think
there?
none of their business model includes anything but residential, like there's no
Good idea,
business.
That would be
Be
good.
perfect place to
Yeah.
build one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a great idea to have something as a.
company store, you know, you don't get your day pass until
Corner
you
store.
buy.
On the other side, we have people pushing the other way, so.
Well, I'll reach out and see what I can find out, and I'll share that information with Brian, Kathleen, and let them decide where it makes most sense for that to go. Does that work?
Yeah, because if we wanted to do that as part, say, block a half an hour or something, and we posted it out, we might get some of the interest. People will come speak to us about it. We can knock that up, get some education in half an hour.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll do it.
Did I have
Well,
any?
you got anything else?
So no other retreats or anything else we're planning for right now?
If there is small subject matters, we can discuss in our regular meetings, right?
Sure.
Instead of having a whole day.
We can. How much lead time to put something on the agenda? You send those out?
Thursday?
Thursday.
Ideally, it would be early in the week before.
Yes. Obviously
At
not
the
Monday
absolute
or
latest.
Tuesday.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Okay, so early Monday, Tuesday, the week before.
Yeah. Actually, it has to be before noon on Tuesday the week before, because it goes to the paper
Okay.
on
Oh.
Tuesday at noon before the meeting.
She sends you and I the draft agenda.
Yeah,
So that's your last opportunity. When you see that draft agenda,
yeah.
that's your last
Okay.
opportunity to have input.
I want to talk about this. Get that in there. Okay.
Well, yeah, ask you if you can.
Very good, thank you.
You have no control.
Well, there are requirements, you know.
Sure.
Yeah, we know our position, so we don't even get the draft.
Anything else anybody has? I do think we may, if, as the summit plan goes, we may want to, at some point, it may be large enough to be a meeting if we talk about the infrastructure support and what the community can use for support.
Yes.
I just don't think we're quite ready for that yet. As they're developing their portion, I think theirs needs to be a little bit more developed in an aspect of what they're really looking for support from.
I'm excited to see how they're gonna do all that infrastructure for $6 million.
I've heard you say that before.
One
Do you have,
thing that I've often thought about to help make multi-unit things cheaper is
Ryan?
to,
do we have no board member concerns today?
Yes, we'll do that.
we got one right now. If you've got a, say, 4 or 6 unit building, the water bill is divided into a service charge and then a usage charge. It seems to me that the service charge is for the pipes and the usage charge is for the preparation of the water and the delivery of it to the spigot. And that really, if you've got 4 units on one pipe, maybe one usage charge divided among those units would be reasonable.
No.
Why?
Because I want all my money.
Whose possession?
Obviously,
So-
the cost of the water system needs to be supported by the income of it.
Right.
However,
We've had a lot of conversations about how you break up the cost fairly, like, so you divide it, how you divide it between your base rate and your usage rate, so
Yes.
that everybody's paying, you know, a similar share. We had that person come in and talk to us, a number of years ago and
Okay.
help us reevaluate.
This would be a good topic for you guys to talk about over coffee.
On your own.
Well,
No, that's a good idea.
Because you may learn something that would, it may change your mind, or you may become more firmly entrenched. But I would suggest, that the two people I would suggest are Heather and Susan Shashak. They worked that project
Okay.
and brought it to the board, because we had to, we were at the point where we were really in need of additional funding if we were going to sustain our water.
Sure.
And that's what we have now, is what came up out of that whole project.
Plus you have the cost of each meter
Yeah.
and the bill.
Concerns, Isabel?
I'm good.
Farhad?
Well, I have no concerns, but. No, you don't get to hear this kind of message in an American town meeting where I would say Ramadan Kareem to everybody. And my wife will be so happy that you guys liked her food. I'm gonna go lie to her that she didn't give me enough food or something.
Does she listen to our meetings?
It should be a regular event, actually.
Yeah, sure. Once a year.
Well, I'm gonna stop in the store tomorrow and find her and tell her
Yeah,
the truth.
does she listen in? Does she ever watch the meetings? No,
She
of course
does
not.
not. No,
Tool?
thank you for joining me in the food. Really appreciate it.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Nothing to add?
Me. I don't think I have anything. As we're going into committee assignments for the year, for us, but also in general, I think we should think about how we can encourage younger people to join committees. Izzy's brought it up before. I know when the team from the DEI committee interviewed some of the teens at the teen center, they expressed interest in that. And I think it's a good training ground. I think we get the rare kid, but I think we could probably advertise in such a way that it would interest people, or, you know.
How old do you have to be on a committee? Do you have to be a voter? Do you have to, what do you have?
Depends.
Well, I was gonna say, why don't we make a youth position on all of our committees?
We had a high school
And-
kid before.
Huh?
We had a high school kid in one of the committees.
Yeah, one of the Parks and Rec.
Yeah.
And, yeah, so,
Yeah, we've had,
just add a high school position. So,
We had some positions and they showed for like 1 or 2 meetings.
right, yeah.
So sustaining.
I think it's hard with school, you know, I think there'd have to be some conversation with the school.
There is a lot of talent, though, in the high school. Like those two kids who interviewed all the ACSD candidates on the MCTV. Anzali, right, the girl? Ezra?
Oh,
They did a great
Nargis?
job. No?
Yeah, she's going to Yale.
There is a lot of talent.
She's very smart. Yeah, I think we should consider it, like earmarking, you know, a better, like, whatever. That's my one thought. I'll be quiet now.
Good.
I'm all set.
Andy?
Thanks.
Okay. Seeking a motion for adjournment?
I
Move.
move.
Oop, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Tell your wife, thanks, that was really good stuff.